This is the Mission 50, organized by Space Analog Station at Marte. And today we have the presentation of Federico Granados Unger about the greenhouse, how would be the food production in Mars. Okay, Federico, you are very welcome to share your presentation.
Thank you very much. So, as Professor Julio said, this is a presentation on the greenhouse for Mars. So this is the flow of the presentation, the topics. First, the internal design, then the machines, technologies necessary for the operation of this facility, the possible resources that we will be able to generate in situ or transported from Earth, the organizational structure of the facility, the number of astronauts required and their positions, the duties of the chief of this facility and of other positions, the proposed astronaut training program, some YouTube videos that can be used to train astronauts who operate the infrastructure, the resources needed for 1 week, including how much food and water would they need, some guidelines to be provided to other facilities of the station, some protocols of the facility, some others regarding to safety, occupancy, entertainment, food microproduction, 3D printing, some technologies and outputs that could be applied to Earth, guidelines to be applied here in the planet, and more about the impact of this facility in the Sustainable Development Goals. So we begin with the design. Here's the master plan of the whole station proposed by Yash Rathod. Here we see where the greenhouse would be located and its connections with other facilities, such as the sanitation center, engineering facility, health facility, and the main station. Here's more in detail the visual concept of the station and where the greenhouse facility is located. Here's the proposed habitat design for the facility, which is divided into 3 floors with 8 meters of diameter. In the bottom floor, we have the lab, the different labs and the workspace. In the second floor, we have the cultivation area, where we will have plants and algae and even other microorganisms. And in the third floor, we have a mix with social and entertainment spaces, those with dormitories for the astronauts, the toilets, and the kitchen. And here's the internal design, roughly pictured in here. Here we can see the different parts from each of the floors. The bigger circle in the left, it represents the first floor, and as you move to the right, you will see floors on top of it. So the middle one is the second floor, and the last one is the third floor. Right. So here we have the stairs, the sanitation hall that is present in the first and the second floors, and the stairs that you could use to travel between the three floors. In the first one, we have the ECLSS system to provide astronauts with water and oxygen and all that they need. Then on the second floor, we have in the circle an apparatus for the generation of heat for both plants and the astronauts. We will talk about it later. We also have a maintenance area in the first floor, a control area, and 3 different laboratories. We'll see them in detail later. On the second floor, we have also a storage area, processing area, our urine processing device, traditional cultivation area with Mars soil and plants growing it. Also an ethylene scrubber that we'll talk about later. A robot storage area for the managing of the cultivars in there, and a proposed aeroponic culture area for most of the plants. And then on the third floor, we have, as we said, the WC, the dorms, the kitchen, the dining room, which will also serve as a social area for astronauts, and a vertical garden. So here's the challenges that I focused the most for this presentation regarding having a greenhouse in Mars. First, we have a difficulty in capturing all of the characteristics of the Martian surface in a single Mars soil simulant. So according to a paper that is referenced here, we see that predicting crop performance will require more knowledge on basic plant biology, and also samples of actual Mars soil bring here on Earth, so we can create better simulants, because today we don't have a single one that represents all the conditions of the planet. And then we have also the average temperatures in Mars are around minus 60 degrees Celsius, because fewer sunlight arrives to its surface, and also we have that Mars has a very thin atmosphere that offers no protection against cosmic radiation. This radiation can turn certain compounds in Mars soil to toxic percolored salts that may cause hypothyroidism in humans. So this is dangerous if you want to grow plants in Mars for human consumption, because you risk having this kind of diseases. Also, the atmosphere has no nitrogen, not even the soil has it, and it's necessary for plants. And also CO2, yes, it's present in all the atmosphere, but it's at a very low concentration than the one needed by plants. Also, we have other poisonous heavy metals found in the soil, and a difficulty in cultivating high-caloric tubercles such as potatoes, either in hydroculture or in analog soils. So, for example, for this important crop, the potato, we need other strategies. So here are the applied technologies that I propose for the facility. First one, as I said, the dry and the wet labs, right? For the dry lab, we had I proposed a bioinformatics lab, and for the first part of the wet lab, we have a molecular biology lab. Why do we need these two labs? Because as I said, we need to have a more fundamental understanding of plants and how would they fare in the Mars atmosphere. So we can prepare those plants, and we can even enhance them to have desired properties, so they can grow more easily in the Mars atmosphere, right? Which could aid us also in terraforming. So, so to know what happens in the plants and the Mars at the gene, protein, and metabolite level, and what changes occur and why, right? So we can do some studies regarding, for example, the lignin content, that is like the support of the plants, like for us, the bones, which in microgravity it has shown that humans have a problem with their bones. They don't. They have problems where they don't support as well as they would in gravity conditions. So maybe this happens also to plants. We would study those aspects to improve them. Also, in these space conditions, plants have also oxidative stress that it can affect their DNA repairing machinery. Also, it can affect their immune system, so their protection against pathogens would be affected. And also, plants have photosynthetic inefficiencies, such as, for example, some enzymes called rubisco that is related to their growth. So these are problems also inherent to these plants. So by studying them, both, for example, in bioinformatics, using computers and analyzing their genetic material, and also in molecular biology by analyzing what molecules and what genes are expressed in them in certain times. We can select some desired species, so we could take them to the tissue culture lab that is part of the wet lab for their enhancement. So this is the other part of the wet lab, as I said, the tissue culture one. So in this lab, we can perform the genetic engineering of plants in order to obtain, as I said, plants that are more resistant to the adverse conditions of Mars. And we can even engineer them to obtain drugs of interest from them. I also proposed using this lab to create a process called in vitro micropropagation of them. One example, and one important example, is the Paulownia tree, which I will cover more detail later on. This technique has several advantages. Using it, you can, in a very short time, obtain new plantlets. You can generate plants that are free from viruses. You can have a culture of a great number of plants in a relatively small area, so even up to 1,000 plantlets in 1 square meter, and it proves more successful in cultivating challenging plants, right, compared to traditional soil. So this strategy could help us have a lot of desired plants, for example, for terraforming amongst other uses. So regarding the previous problem that I had mentioned, for example, the one regarding the potato, which couldn't be cultured by hydroponics or in traditional soil, I proposed for the majority of plants being cultured in the greenhouse to acquire an aeroponic strategy, which is based in that plants are grown in a misty air environment that provides them with water and nutrients. So with this strategy, we can save up more water and nutrients that, for example, in hydroponics, by using this kind of mist. And with this strategy, we wouldn't have problems cultivating those important crops, such as those tubercles that I mentioned. And but nevertheless, it's important to harness all the Mars regolith that is readily available. So we will also propose this traditional cultivation place, as I mentioned in the picture earlier. So for this, we could have bioreactors for nitrogen-fixing bacteria, so they can fix atmospheric nitrogen and eliminate the toxic perchloric salts that is present in Mars soil. So we could use this soil present in the planet to grow these plants. Other technologies would include the water obtention in the planet, for example, in the poles of Mars, and desalinization systems, because as we know, there's a lot of salts in the water of present in the planet. We also would need water recovery and distribution systems. This device that I mentioned earlier, the multi-mission radioisotope thermoelectric generator, coupled with a thermostat, so we could maintain the temperature and even generate electricity without heat in the station. Some LED lighting. We would need, for example, red and blue LEDs for the growth of the plants, because of the problem of not having enough light coming from the sun to the planet. Also, some sensors related to humidity, CO2 and O2. An ethylene scrubber that's part of the advanced agriculture device, which would enable us to remove ethylene that is related to plants getting, I would say, for plants it inhibits their longevity, right? It makes them not last as much as they could. So it prolongs the lifespan of these plants, and to allow it for consumption later on, and it converts this gas into water and CO2. Also, I proposed pre-programmed robots with machine learning and computer vision capabilities to set up, run, and maintain the part of the greenhouse, the second floor, obviously with human supervision. Also, I propose using urine processing devices to harness more nitrogen, some photobioreactors for algae, and the ECLSS system for the astronauts. So, according to this paper, in order to provide the nutrition that to cover all the human requirements in a small cultivation area, we will have these plants and this strain of algae to be cultivated in the greenhouse. So we will be focusing mainly in soybeans, spinach, mushrooms, wheat, and seaweed. And also in the photobioreactors, we will have the Spirulina platensis algae. So by combining these plants and algae, we could have covered all the daily requirements regarding the intake of 2,000 kilocalorie diet for both adults and children. Well, only adults will form a part of the station, of the facility. So, as I mentioned, we will also have to pay attention to terraforming. So, this is the tree I mentioned earlier, the Paulonia tree. So I proposed recently here in Mexico, in the Tec de Monterrey University, they achieved for the first time the in vitro micropropagation of this tree. And this technique obviously also can allow the further enhancement of this tree so it can cope with the conditions of the planet. So this is a tree that grows the fastest in the world. It has light wood, but very strong. It's a semi-precious type of wood, which could be used to build some structures in the facility. It can help regenerate eroded soils and contaminated ones, so like the Mars soil. It's a tree that absorbs the most CO2 in the world. It's 10 times that any other tree, so it could help transform the CO2 in the planet to O2 for terraform, right? So we can have a lot of plantlets of this tree using that technique and help us in that process. Also, in a paper in these references, mentions the cultivation of bluegrass of the genus Poa, because they can handle frigid temperatures like those of Mars and intense solar radiation. Nevertheless, they take little space and require little maintenance and produce lots of seeds, so we wouldn't have problem with the reproduction, and they could further help us in this process. And also, in the references, they proposed by Harvard, placing sheets of silica aerogel on certain regions of the planet's surface in order to warm the ground, melt the ice present in it, and help it to make an environment more suitable for plants. So with these strategies, we could begin to transform this planet for our purposes, for human colonization. So management. How would be organized the structure in this facility? I propose one greenhouse manager, 3 scientists, 1 for the dry lab and 2 for each of the subdivisions of the wet lab, and 2 technical assistants. So in total, there would be 6 astronauts. We would have the profiles required for the greenhouse manager and scientists, obviously differentiating between them by the previous experience. We will be looking for example, biologist, biotechnologist, chemical engineer, programmer, environmental engineer, or astrobiologist. And for technical assistants, we will be looking for an electric engineer, a mechatronic engineer, a mechanical engineer, or an IT person. So for the chief of infrastructure, he or she must have previous administrative experience, obviously. He must assign specific projects to the scientists, obviously depending on the present requirements of the facility or of the whole station. and supervise the progress, keep track on it. He will also have to communicate constantly with the chiefs of the other facilities in order to collaborate with them in bigger projects regarding the whole station. So for the other positions, the scientists would be focused mainly to conduct experiments related to either bioinformatics, molecular biology, or tissue culture, to get more adapted plants for the environment, and also some side projects, right? Looking for signs of life, maybe, or something that they propose. Technical assistants would have the task of supervising the correct functioning of the various systems of the facility, with special interest in obviously in the robotic systems and the multi-mission radio support thermoelectric generator, because obviously because of their related safety concerns of having this kind of devices in the station, which are very useful, but we have to keep an eye on them. And the robotic systems, because they will be the main the main systems that will be in charge of taking care of the plants. And also, they will have to fix any malfunction problems related to them, regarding even including these two devices, but in general of all the various systems of the facility. So for the astronaut training program, I propose Mars analog missions, for example, in virtual reality, like the one in the image. Virtual, like in this example, we can have as an example this precise virtual mission, or in-person analog missions, right? Where you go to a place that simulates the environment of Mars and you perform several tasks. Also, that training program should include sustainable practices in space, obviously, because we are forced to save as many resources as we can in a foreign planet where we don't have as much resources as we have here in Earth. So we have to foster this. Also, we have to have a psychological preparation for the long periods of isolation, obviously, because we will be in the station, but everyone in their own facility, and I don't know, maybe if a pandemic like this arises, they will be forced to remain there for maybe long periods of time, so they have to be able to cope with that. Also, the capacitation in the technologies of the facility and the station. Of course, those that are the most important. If it's not closely related to the task they will be undergoing in the facility. So if something happens, they can know what to do in, for example, an emergency situation, which is related to the next point, the capacitation in the emergency protocols of the station. Also training in first aid and hygiene training, for example, for if you need to go back and forth from Mars to Earth, you will need this kind of training to cope with that, the acceleration of the rocket. Now here I present some YouTube videos that can be used to train astronauts who operate in the infrastructure. You can check them out later. And for the resources needed for 1 week, I based on this paper, where it mentions that they propose a daily food consumption for 10 astronauts to be equal to 2,100 grams. So for 10 astronauts, the weekly food consumption combined would be of 40,700 grams. And per astronaut, the amount of food for a week that he or she would need would be of 1,470 grams. Also considering a daily water requirement of 3 liters per astronaut, they need more water in space. Each astronaut would need for a week an approximate of 21 liters. So regarding the guidelines to be provided to other facilities, it would be for them to have indicators of consumption of water use, also of oxygen, and regarding the CO2 accumulation. Also, we would suggest the emergency buttons in each facility and methods of quick communication in case of an unexpected event that could be related to the safety of the astronauts in other facilities. Also, sanitization routines when moving between facilities and outside the station. If you do extravehicular missions, for example. So in order to prevent the contamination inside the facility or outside of it, right? Because we don't have to contaminate Mars with life coming from within the facility. So an astrobiologist goes out of the station and says, "Oh well, I found life," but no, that is life coming from the station. Also, continuous in-person or virtual meetings with the members of other facilities would be suggested to keep the mental health of the astronauts. So, regarding the specific protocols of the greenhouse facility, I would propose a comparison of sensor reports coming from other facilities with those of the greenhouse facility. So we can know if there's a problem with our facility of the sensor, regarding their sensors, routine checking of the correct functioning of the automatized systems within the facility with an interest in, for example, the robots that will be managing the second floor of the facility, and also routine checking of the correct functioning of systems containing plants or microorganisms. So we know that they aren't contaminated or they don't have like a leak or something that could be dangerous for the astronauts. Regarding the protocols of safety, we have routine monitoring of the psychological and physical well-being of each of the members by filling daily reports, like the ones we have been filling for this mission. Routine sanitization of members going or returning from either other facilities or out of the station. As I mentioned earlier, it's a major concern. Also, periodic evacuation drill exercises, so we can let astronauts know what to do in case of an emergency. And also, I suggest to have emergency deposits of O2, water, food, seeds, nutrients for plants, and electricity in case of the malfunctioning of the corresponding generation systems of each one of these basic needs. Regarding the protocols for occupancy and entertainment, we have routine socialization activities, such as casual meetings between the members of the facility, a proposed movie nights, for example, the constant contact with family and friends on Earth, to keep in touch with them, and also cooking classes, right? So they can learn how to cook their own food if they like. Also some leisure areas, so they can get a little time free from their work, and promote the contact with plants, obviously with previous sanitization, so they don't contaminate the plants. Regarding the protocols for food microproduction, we have risk management, which it's related to identify, assess, and control threats regarding the food microproduction, management and equitable distribution of the available food, the maintenance of the food levels and their variety. So the astronauts have a complete nutrition, and they don't get bored by just getting, for example, just algae all the time. Also, the waste management, so they can have a circular economy, a circular ecosystem. And also harvesting and processing for consumption. Regarding the protocols for 3D printing, we have, for example, in these references, some researchers found that by combining chitosan, that is found in fungi, crustaceans, insects, fish, amphibians, so they may form part of every artificial environment. By combining it with Martian regolith, a chitinous material they called biolith, can be created and used to 3D print from basic tools to rigid shelters. Right? So we can see in the bottom left image some little models that they made. Behind the little astronaut, we have a concept of Marcia, of the Mars shelter. So this is a very good material to work with. And on the other side, we have the polylactic acid called PLA that is obtained by processing plants grown previously in Earth, but we could be using this technology to process plants grown in Mars in our facility in order to generate a renewable bioplastic that can be used to produce, for example, from kitchen utensils for the facility to even full-fledged shelters, right? Such as Mars, which is in the bottom right image. And here we have the spin-offs. Technology, regarding the technologies and outputs that could be applied to Earth, having mentioned this polylactic acid and the BioLith, and the researchers created, they could be used probably as novel bioprinting techniques on Earth to 3D print, even from obviously kitchen utensils, because they are no toxic, such as their counterparts that are common here on Earth. In order to manufacture straws, dishes, and glasses, for example, for homes for people living in rural areas and under strict extreme climate conditions, to even homes, right? For example, like the one shown in this image. So they can have a place to live in, even under those extreme climate conditions. Regarding the guidelines to be applied to daily life on Earth, we would have regarding the sustainable development, obviously the responsible water and food consumption practices, the use of alternative and green construction materials, so like the ones mentioned in the previous slide, waste management, in order to promote the recycling of the resources really available in this planet, because it's a shame that we waste so much, for example, in food and organic matter that could be used for these advancements, and throwing it away, right? We will have to use that for better purposes that are useful for the society. Also, obviously, the promotion of a circular economy basing on these principles. And I propose also the cultivation and consumption of superfoods in areas with scarce resources. For example, these superfoods that are called amaranth, quinoa, and chia, that they have excellent properties regarding, for example, protein content. Chia has a lot of fat content, so it can also be added to the list of the previous list of the plants to be cultured in the station, because it could even compete maybe with potato. And they don't have it isn't so picky but when growing. And also obviously the algae, the Spirulina platensis, which is very nutritious, and if combined, these strategies could help solve many problems in rural areas, for example. And regarding the impacts to sustainable development goals, we by the technologies and the strategies proposed in this facility, we would be solving for example, or we're aiding in the solving of point number 2 of zero hunger, point number 3, good health and well-being. As we know, we need to be in contact with plants and all of this to have a good mental state of the astronauts. Also, the number 11, the sustainable cities and communities, it would be an example of a sustainable facility. Number 12, responsible consumption and production, for example, of food in this case. And number 13, climate action. Obviously in the context of Mars, so we can turn from a climate that is adverse for humans and plants and most of living beings. So they can fare better on the planet using terraforming techniques. And number 15, life on land, obviously, as well, taking the context of Mars, of all the living beings that will be living on the surface of Mars. So, well, the references are present in their respective slides. And thank you very much for your time in this presentation.